So the Scip members, we need to look at possibly taking some out of the ALR where the infrastructure is very close, where the infrastructure is in place for a short-term solution, and long-term solution is we need to look at the OCP and try to put some very realistic plans in place where in the next 20 to 50 years we can try to avoid what we're in now. Joe, would you like to say?
You wanted a roundtable discussion here,
yes,
and
yes,
we've got like
that's
4 people
exactly
on
what
it.
we want, yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Kendall.
Well, you're preaching to the converted here, because being in real estate, I know full well the crisis that we are in, and I have to say that I took this to an in-camera meeting probably about November, and wanted my fellow councillors here to have a look at this, and we were facing the infill report, and I personally was disappointed that at that point, when it came out, maybe the industry didn't know about the infill report, because I thought everybody would just be up in arms and saying that isn't realistic. There is no way that those lots are out there, but I don't think that we heard anything at that point. So it's good, happy to see that you're up there and that Scip is really addressed. And I don't know what the long-term solution is. I think we do need to sit down and really discuss it, because there are infrastructure problems no matter what piece of property goes to be developed, and I personally think maybe we're coming into a time where some tax dollars have to go to upgrade some services, say along Foothill, to make it more realistic to get development out on that end where there is potential. We probably need to really have some serious discussion, because I've also been told by Area C people, not Area C, Area C, South, anyway, out Blind Bay way, that there are at least 2 lots being sold every week that people would prefer to be in Salmon Arm, but there's no way you can buy here. So it's there, but it's not very practical, our community. I look forward to sitting down and having a discussion and seeing if there is any common ground and what Scip thinks should be done, because there's nothing. I think there's 6 lots out there now to be sold, and it's anywhere from 120 to 140. And then there's some strata in the uplands yet. There's a few, but it's just. I've got a son-in-law who's in construction. I have a husband who's faced this, so I know full well. You're 110% right.
Councilor Scip.
Thank you, Worship. Recognizing that yes, discussion needs to occur with the local development community. However, I guess of course what it comes back to is, and staff can probably reiterate this, when is our next OCP review due, and what are the sort of expected costs, at least base budget required for it, and have we put anything aside for that yet?
Officers.
There's no scheduled OCP review. What has been occurring, I believe, on an annual basis for a number of years is some money's been put into a reserve fund, anticipating the day when that comes. The earliest it could occur would be 2008, because there's not enough money in 2007 budget to move forward. I spoke to a consultant recently who does that type of work, and although very preliminary and just sort of discussing on the range of costs, an OCP review may cost anywhere from $60,000 to $120,000, depending on the scope and the level of public participation. And then further to that, a very comprehensive review could cost up over $200,000. And I believe in the reserves right now, I might have about 30 or 35. I haven't checked.
So from that perspective, if we were wanting this to move forward with a discussion involving the community beyond the development community, certainly we're looking at, for this budget discussion that's upcoming this fall, potentially having to add up to 2% tax increase just to account for if we were to engage in a extensive and full-scale OCP review in 2008. Would that be approximate?
Yeah, it really depends on the scope of the issues that need to be tackled. I think anytime you would look at the OCP, you may have some target issues that you may want to address, whether it be housing possibly as one of them. However, when you open it up, there's implications for other topics within there as well.
Yeah.
So it's tough to keep it too narrow.
As well, I think, of course, the other thing that we have to sort of think of in terms of, the R1 housing issue is sort of the scale of homes. I understand the desire to build affordable housing. Of course, that's all relative to who can afford it. So I think the other part of the discussion really is that I think something that I think the Premier of the province called upon is for a bit of a paradigm shift in the development community, moving away from larger size homes to smaller homes and so on. And I think that discussion needs to occur as well as to whether or not, as opposed to building 3,000 square foot or larger homes, by building more 1,000 to 1,500 square foot homes, whether we can get any more housing out of it, whether through the zoning changes or otherwise. So certainly I think that's part of the discussion of how that would occur, because certainly that's the direction that's coming from upper levels of government that they would like to see to counteract some of the costs of housing issues in the province. And certainly I think with our local community we need to have that discussion.
Thank you. Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, and thank you, Dave, for coming forward. Corey, how many R1 building permits have you had this year?
I don't know the numbers, but I guess about 100.
How does that compare to other years?
I think in the last few years it's been similar.
So I think one of the challenges that I see is because lot prices are so high, developers who develop subdivisions basically aren't selling their lots to anybody else. They're building all the houses under themselves because they can build 3 or 4 a year and do well. So I know that's a challenge. I think Councillor Itzan's point's a good point in that we're talking about two different things. We talk about affordable housing and we talk about R1 development, because as Councillor Flynn pointed out, even with the R4 development that's happening in town, most of those units are over $300,000. And R1 now can't get into an R1 development under $400,000 in seminar. And it's not really just a phenomena that's local, as you know. Southern British Columbia, any type of populated area, that's a problem. Thought about it and think about a solution, but I don't affordable housing with R1 because I don't think they're the same things. I know for my children, very unlikely they'll start an R1 lot or an R1 house when they first get into a housing unit. Much more likely they're going to have to start in some other type of more creative situation. The challenge that we have here is, of course, infrastructure costs lots of money, and to extend infrastructure so that we can open up R1 lots is going to cost taxpayer lots of money, and it's certainly not going to make those lots cheap. They're still going to be very expensive. So the OCP, I think we have to look at some other creative solutions besides just let's extend the infrastructure out and leapfrog develop. My other point is the ALR, which you point out. We have had quite a few requests come forward to us here to request ALR remove land for type of housing, and we've supported a lot of those. But our support has not been successful in almost every case. In almost every case, ALR has said no. So while we can assist there, we don't make that decision. So we're limited as well.
Great. Can I just address a couple things? You're absolutely right when you talk of infrastructure costing big dollars. That's why when you're planning, you have to look at the infrastructure. And you have to say the infrastructure, we got a school here, the line ends here, the water line ends here. Therefore, if we develop this area, infrastructure's there. Obviously, if you pick a spot away out in wherever, in some other corner, or even Area B, the Area B is we've already closed schools down in Area B. To get infrastructure there is very difficult. So look at infrastructure, and the cost of infrastructure is a very, very important thing to do.